East Coast on alert. A tropical storm will impact your week if you live anywhere from South Carolina to Maine. Those mysterious seeds sent to Americans' homes, what experts think they are. Plus, what is going on with Tick-Tock? Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Monday, August 3rd. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo. Good morning.
Jill, happy Monday. How's the city today? You're back in the office, right?
Yeah, same deal. Hot, kind of empty, a little weird.
It's August. Dog days of summer, baby.
And it is very hot. As you saw me on the monitor and said I look schwitzy. I thank you for your honesty, and I feel schwitzy.
Well, I feel you. I feel the same way, actually, today. It is warm.
Okay, let's get to the news. The U.S. has now entered a, quote, new phase of its coronavirus outbreak, which is now, quote, extraordinarily widespread. This is according to Dr. Deborah Birx of the White House Task Force. So the reason she says this is because areas of the country that had been relatively safe from the virus, places like Alaska, Hawaii, and Montana, are now seeing a surge of infections. There's also some not great looking trend lines emerging in big cities in the Midwest and the East Coast, which had mostly gotten their outbreaks under control. Meanwhile, Congress comes back today, but nowhere near a deal on a fresh stimulus package.
Yeah, so that $600 has now lapsed, and they will get back to work on trying to hammer something out. But like you said, there doesn't seem to be much agreement right now. But these things usually go from, not looking like they're going to happen to then all of a sudden happening in the span of a few minutes. So you never know. But the other thing, we haven't talked about the pandemic overseas in a while. It's really ramping up, not looking good in India and the Philippines. Also in Australia, the situation in Australia, they had really gotten it together, and now it's just like unraveling. They just put all 5 million residents of Melbourne. How do you say that city?
If you live in Australia, you pronounce it Melbourne.
Yeah.
Like there's no R, but I think most people who don't live there say Melbourne.
Well, anyway, Melbourne is on this strict lockdown now. They're essentially saying that nobody can even go outside. So it just shows you, there is basically no political will to do a lockdown like that in places in the United States right now, but they are still doing them around the world, trying to get this thing under control. But back to the States. One of our listeners named Jasmine, she wrote us the other day and talked about this, mentioned this bike. She's from South Dakota, and she was mentioning this biker rally that's coming to her town next week. And I looked into it, and it's 250,000 motorcycle bikers are coming to this town in South Dakota next week, which to my knowledge would be the largest event in this country since at least March. So you got to worry about things like that, right? Like, are those guys, all of those guys and gals, could they be seeding outbreaks in other places? It seems really risky.
Just to follow up on Australia, I looked at some of the numbers. So Victoria, that's the state where Melbourne is in, reported 671 new cases and 7 deaths on Sunday. Okay, so the total that they're at is about 11,557 infections. Just let's compare here. I mean, we're getting like 12,000 new infections in some cases a day in a state like Florida. And to your point, I mean, people aren't there allowed to leave the house. Like, that's how seriously they're taking it. Here, the debate is just, should we wear masks in public and should we be closing nightclubs? I mean, it's incredible.
I know.
Just for people who say, both sides are saying the other one is politicizing it. But when you don't do that, you get a response like you're seeing in Australia. When politics is out of it and you make decisions solely based on health information and science, then you get, a response like you're seeing in Australia.
Right.
Dr. Birx here in the U.S. is even warning that people who live in certain areas right now wear masks at home, which is incredible.
I hadn't heard that, really.
Yeah, like that's her new warning, because she's saying, especially if you live in a multi-generational household, this is how you prevent it from a young person just say maybe coming in and getting their mom or their grandparents sick. Also, the St. Louis Cardinals, now the second MLB team trying to contain a COVID-19 outbreak. They have 4 confirmed cases, expecting even more positive results when the tests come back today. Their weekend game, their whole series actually against the Brewers, was postponed.
Yeah, the MLB continues to just be a complete mess. Meanwhile, basketball's going great. The games this weekend were great. I believe that they still have 0 confirmed cases in the bubble down in Orlando. But in baseball, the Miami Marlins, which was the team that had the first first outbreak, they have finally left Philadelphia. They had been stranded in that city for a week after all those players tested positive. So the Marlins who had positive tests were sent back to Miami on a bus. Which is almost, it's like the perfect sort of, thing for this year, like just having to take a bus back from Philly to Miami because he tested positive. Meanwhile, while there's like a hurricane approaching Miami. But meanwhile, the rest of the team is headed to Baltimore to play the Orioles. So anyway, just, baseball, a complete mess.
On to some other news here. All eyes on Isaias. If I, again,
Here you go.
am I saying that correctly? The tropical storm could make landfall in the Carolinas later today, possibly as a Category 1 hurricane. It mostly spared Florida as it remains far enough offshore, but the entire East Coast is now likely to see an impact from heavy rains and wind as this system moves up the coast.
Yeah, so it kind of, like I just mentioned, it kind of raked Florida on the eastern seaboard, but nothing too bad, it looks like. So the thing to watch today is a possible landfall in the Carolinas tonight. As you mentioned, it looks like Myrtle Beach is under a hurricane warning, and then it will sort of like do a little shimmy and go just basically northeast, and it'll rake the D.C. area tomorrow. New York City, here in New York City, we will probably get pretty much a washout tomorrow night into Wednesday, and then New England will see heavy rains on Wednesday, and then this thing will be gone. So that's just what to keep an eye on.
And it's only August. It's the first week of August. I fear for September.
It's going to be a long month, I think. Yeah.
Okay, on to some business news. Microsoft is in talks to buy Tick-Tock. I mean, this is a headline I never would have said even a week ago at this time.
Yeah, I know.
It's just incredible. Okay, so Microsoft in talks to buy Tick-Tock. Tick-Tock is the Chinese social media phenomenon, that app that President Trump threatened to ban last week. He is citing national security concerns. So Microsoft saying it spoke to the White House over the weekend and will continue to pursue a deal to acquire Tick-Tock's service in the U.S. Many in the president's circle reportedly believe this is a better option than an outright ban of the app. Reuters is reporting that the president gave ByteDance 45 days to reach a deal. ByteDance is the owner of Tick-Tock.
Yeah, the Chinese parent company based in Beijing. So yeah, if you missed this, because this sort of happened out of nowhere on Friday, the president told reporters that he was going to ban the app, just as it was also reported that Microsoft was in talks with ByteDance to acquire it. So these two things kind of happening at the same time. Look, I think that the president was upset with those stories that came out a while back about the teenagers on TikTok kind of like sabotaging his rally in Tulsa. Plus, I think there's just a general desire amid within this White House to hit back at China on the virus. We had sort of like an anti-China, stance even before coronavirus, just with the tariffs. But I think the virus has really, given how much it has imperiled the president's reelection effort, I think that the president especially really wants to hit back at China, and he sees TikTok as a way to do it. Now, I mean, the problem is that's like politically fraught, right? To just like ban some super popular app because of its ties to another country. But that's not to say there aren't real issues with a company like TikTok that is hoovering up your information, and they're in China, and you don't really know what they're doing with it. They say they don't store it in the U.S. and they wouldn't hand over anything to the Communist Party in Beijing, but who knows how true that is, right? The other thing is, I'm just not exactly sure why Microsoft would even really want this company. I mean, I get that it's big and it's popular. But Microsoft made what I think is a pretty smart bet a few years ago, and they basically said, like, we're going to stay out of the social media game and the consumer tech game, and we're just going to focus on B2B. We're going to focus on businesses and enterprises, enterprise software. They bought LinkedIn, which I guess was their closest thing to getting into social media, but it's a little bit different. There's a reason why Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella wasn't up there getting grilled last week with the rest of those tech CEOs, right? They have sort of stayed out of this really fraught business of, social media apps.
I mean, I guess the reason Microsoft would want it is just like Facebook has a social media, is obviously social media. I don't know. It's a big question. I mean, Microsoft never had like the cool factor.
Yeah, right.
And maybe that's what they're looking for. But some might argue that, to your point, there's a reason that Microsoft wasn't part of those tech hearings yesterday. I mean, they dealt with that stuff in the 90s, and I think that they're doing pretty well now. But Satya Nadella is a super smart guy. So you got to think they know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, look, the thing has 800 million users. Like that alone is reason to want it, no matter who you are, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't want to touch any of this with a 10-foot pole if I were one of these guys. But that's why I'm not a tech
TikTok is where the kids are. That's
exactly right.
Facebook and Instagram is for
the
old fogies like us.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to touch upon this really bizarre seed story. I'm sure people have seen
I love the seeds.
Okay, so the Department of Agriculture has now identified some of the mysterious seeds that people are reporting getting in the mail unsolicited with Chinese postmarks over the last few weeks. The USDA says the seeds are mostly herbs like mint and thyme. They're probably harmless, but they still should not be planted in the off chance that they could be an invasive species. Of course, people are planting them. One man in Arkansas did plant his and told local news he has no idea what's been growing out of it, but it looks like squash.
I don't know why I think that. I just thought that was so funny. Like just getting like seeds in the mail unsolicited and be like, yeah, I'll just plant these and see what happens.
Better than being like, I'll put them in my smoothie and eat them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So here's the deal. The authorities think that what this is part of what's called a brushing scam, which I didn't know what this was. So I looked into it. So this is when it's like an e-commerce thing, right? It's when merchants create a bunch of fake orders and then they send them out to just random addresses. With like just things that don't have a lot of value in them, like seeds, for instance. And the whole idea is that it helps you improve your rankings, like on an Amazon or like an e-commerce site like that. I don't really know how exactly that works, but that's the idea behind this. So that's what this almost certainly is. There's no reason to think it's any kind of like biological warfare, which people were actually worried about, or anything. And I don't blame people for being worried about that at this point. Like what? Nothing is off the table this year, right? I mean, a seed attack from China, why not? But anyway, there's no reason to think any of that's the case. It doesn't appear to be anything more nefarious than a sort of e-commerce scam.
Good. I mean, hopefully that's what it is. And I agree with you. I'm not this year. I wouldn't take any chances. Okay, Carlo, we haven't talked about Ellen in a while, or potentially ever on this podcast, but there are rumors swirling in Hollywood over the fate of the Ellen DeGeneres show after a series of news reports citing former employees described a toxic and abusive work culture at the show. Actors Brad Garrett and Leah Thompson tweeted that the reports about how Ellen treats her staff are common knowledge. Meanwhile, at least one of the show's EPs is reportedly on the way out.
Yeah, this would be following that BuzzFeed article that I think, if we didn't mention it in the podcast, we did it in the newsletter last week. The latest BuzzFeed report showing that a bunch of the EPs of this show were allegedly like pretty bad to staff. But anyway, another one of the EPs, this guy Andy Lassner, who you may know of, because I think he sort of has like his own kind of following on social media, I think on Twitter. But he shot down rumors that the show's cancellation, saying that she's coming back. They're just on like a little bit of a hiatus. She's coming back to start shooting this month. There's also reports in the tabloids today about James Corden being on deck to replace Ellen. And that he has long been groomed as her replacement. Though, I mean, I don't know. Is that a promotion? Like he has a late night show, right? Like, is it a
Right.
promotion to go to the daytime? I don't know.
And these days, anyway, it's like, is there even appointment TV? Like, don't people just mostly DVR or watch whatever they want when they want to watch it? But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the thing about Ellen is like, I guess that the problem of having a show based on you being nice, right? Like, it's the whole
Yeah.
idea
Right.
and premise of Ellen is that she's like about putting good into the world and being a nice person, is that, if that's not really what's going on behind the scenes, I guess you're right to be called out for it. I don't know. I mean, I had actually heard some rumors about that too, and I remember being like, what? Because I actually love Ellen. And when I was on maternity leave, I watched the Ellen DeGeneres show. When I talk about appointment viewing, 3 p.m. every day, I was watching Ellen. And it was
It's like
probably
when
one of the best hours of the day.
That's how I felt when Regis died. I was like, Regis was my appointment TV whenever I was out sick, like in high school, right? Like, oh, Regis is on. But yeah, no, I think that's a good point about right. So, and people love, to tear a celebrity down, and she may deserve it. I don't even know. Although I have heard these rumors just offhand about her being sort of like mean to people, and I don't know. I'm not a part of that world at all. So if I've heard them, I'm sure everybody else in Hollywood has. But we'll see. I mean, she's a valuable asset. I don't think that they would, just cut her just over some of these stories, especially because these stories have not really been about her. They've mostly been about the producers and sort of like the behind the scenes machinations at that show.
She put
But
out
of
a
course,
statement. She put out a statement saying,
Yeah.
Maybe she, as the show got bigger and hired more people, maybe she didn't have as much control over the culture, and
Well,
she could have done a better job tamping down on some of her people.
Sure. And not to keep to string this out, but I've worked on shows, with really high profile talent. Not that you're not high profile talent, Jill, but I mean like like the Today. I'm talking about like the Today Show, right? And like there is the producers do there's a real like Chinese wall almost between like some of the talent and the staff, right? Like Ann Curry didn't always know exactly like what the PAs were up to at the Today Show, right? So just make of that what you will.
Listen, you always want to feel, I guess, though, that people who are on air, especially in personality-driven roles, are the same on air that they are off air.
Right.
And it's disappointing when you find out that they're not. But I guess, you have to remember they are playing some type of role. I think Jimmy Fallon, I've heard, is pretty similar. And I've seen him in person because I used to live in the same neighborhood as him. And he really always was like the nicest guy, even off air.
I think I've heard that he's like a really nice guy.
Lester Holt, too, by the way. And we
Lester
could go
Holt's
off on the nicest. I used to work, I was on the desk at NBC and would talk to him every once in a while. I mean, he is like
You know what we should do, Jill? We
guys.
should do a special podcast where we just tell stories from our days at NBC and like who was not and who wasn't. Probably get in trouble for that, but
yeah,
good
we'll never
content.
work again. Okay, let's move on. Finally, if you didn't see it yesterday, for the first time in 45 years, NASA astronauts returning from space splashed down in the water with their capsule parachuting into the Gulf of Mexico. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, remember them, the dads? They were strapped inside for the dramatic old school ride. The landing marked a massively successful inaugural run for Elon Musk's SpaceX, which is now the first private company ever to safely deliver humans to and from space. I mean, awesome.
Hats off, man. Like this guy is having. I mean, these astronauts and everybody who worked on this deserve a round of applause. But Elon Musk is having an insane year. Tesla is crushing it. SpaceX just did, as you perfectly put it, what no other company has ever done. He had a baby. But
what
and
is
he
it?
still
We
acts
still
like,
don't totally know the name of the baby.
no,
right?
I don't even pretend to know what the name is. But he still gets in trouble for like acting like an idiot on Twitter. I will never understand that. If I were a billionaire, I just would not use social media. Like I would let my actions speak for themselves. But to each their own, I guess, right?
There's
Anyway,
not really an
kudos to him.
upside for social media, I think. If you're
there isn't an
if you're
upside.
Elon Musk.
No, absolutely. But anyway, it's the video is really cool. I'll link to it in the newsletter today if you want to watch it. It was very retro. It was like what it looked like when when they were coming back from space, like in the 60s and 70s. They just like whoosh, right into the ocean.
It's awesome. I mean, look, we just sent the Perseverance to Mars. I feel like there's this renewed interest now in space, and I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone's like, well, can we get out of here?
Get us the heck out of Earth, please. Yeah. We're done. Okay, everybody, that's what you need to know for Monday, August 3rd.
Bye, guys.